Well, hello, Stacey Murphy here with a video on record keeping. This is for the challenge, the $400 worth of vegetables and herbs challenge in 40 days. And sorry for the strange format of this video, but I want to walk you around this workbook. This is going to be one of your biggest assets in this process, and here's why. When you write things down and you create a process for yourself, you can do this again and again, and this is what's going to help you over time get a system in place that's going to help you get the same results and better. This is the trick down the road to doubling and tripling your yield once you have your system set up. Now, if you're a new grower, a brand new grower, this is the place where you set that system up so that you get a high success rate for growing those vegetables. So this workbook is a huge asset to you. That's the whole intention behind this, is to get you hooked on growing those groceries and in 40-day segments, and then your next 40-day segment is going to be easier, and the segment after that is going to be even easier. All right, so this workbook has a series of different types of pages. Some of the pages are like this page where I'm asking you to journal a little bit, to set goals for yourself for the course of the challenge. So I highly recommend that you take a couple minutes and answer these questions and tune in to what is happening for you and what you want out of this challenge. The second type of page that's in this workbook is a weekly checklist. These are things that you need to do. This particular checklist is for week 0. This is to get you up and running, to get you planning for the week. And the videos will walk you through each of these different steps. And so that's the process, is that you basically go through, watch the video, do the exercises, and check it off the list so you know that you're on your way to the next step. And then the third type of page is a workbook page where you can do the planning for your garden. So in this case, you might be planning out your planting beds, and you can use these in any way you like. You can also draw on separate paper if that makes more sense for you. And you'll basically be drawing right on top of here circles to represent where plants go and laying out where your crops go. And there's a video that talks you through that process. Similarly, there are pages where you're going to list all of your garden expenses and keep track of them, because we're actually going to subtract out your expenses so that we get a real cost. So we may grow more in vegetables than just $400 worth. We may grow $600 worth, but we're going to subtract out any initial expenses. So we're going to get a real number. And so I go through a process where I show you the expenses that I had for my bed and how that played out. I highly recommend keeping a harvest log. This is where you're going to measure how much your crops are worth. And so basically what you're doing is you are each week you're going to be harvesting, and you would complete this harvest log with all the different crops. Here I just have my top 3 crops here: chard, kale, and celery. And I look at, okay, when I first transplant them, they go in the ground. I probably won't harvest them for a couple weeks. They start to grow. I start to get some small leaves off of them, and then over time I start to get more and more leaves off of them each week. And then I put in my total amount of leaves that I've harvested, and I put in a price per amount. And for my greens, what I know about my local area is that they are $3 per 10 leaves in a bunch for the organics, and so that's the price that I'm using, and so the value there is for the total crop of all of those. So that's the way that I keep my harvest log. You might want to make a couple of tweaks to the way that you keep your harvest log, but I find this works really well. And I find that even if you're harvesting daily, for, let's say you go outside and you're harvesting for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, maybe you add that all up at some later date to make it into a weekly chunk so you get a sense. You could also make this a daily harvest log if that makes more sense for you. So whatever works for you. And then what you're going to fill out, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how to do this, very important, is write down the crops that you're planting, where you're planting them, the number of plants, and what the process is for those plants as you go through this exercise. So what that looks like is, for each one of these crops, basically what you're going to do is you're going to say, where am I going to plant this? Well, my chard, my kale, and my celery, those are in planting bed 1. Radish, turnips, and spinach, that's in planting bed 2. And then I write down the number of plants that I put in the ground, and some of them might be transplants and some of them might be direct seeded. So in the next column over where it says day 0, that's when the crop is going in the ground. So this is kind of like your timeline for when crops are going to get planted and when you're going to harvest them. So what I like to do is I like to say TP for transplanted. So I transplanted my chard, my kale, my celery on day 0. I direct seeded my radish, turnips, and spinach on day 0 in a different bed. And then I like to show by color which days those crops are in the ground. Maybe I'm not harvesting them yet. I show them as yellow to show that they're maturing. And then when they do finally become a crop that I start to harvest, I start to shade it in green and I mark a little X to show that I've harvested it. And then I can kind of have a visual reference of how long it takes for these crops to grow, right? So you'll notice here that my radish, they actually only take 21 days to mature. And so I start harvesting them at about 21 days, and they usually take a week or two to come in fully. Some of them come in before others. So I have a couple weeks of harvesting there. And then my spinach is, my baby spinach has a 25 days to maturity, so I'm going to start harvesting those about 25 days in, and I'm going to have 3 rounds of harvest for those, 3 different weeks. So there's videos on how to harvest, and you'll understand a little bit more about why I'm showing 3 weeks of harvest for those spinach and 2 weeks of harvest for those radish. The point I'm trying to make here is to make a record of this so you can see it visually unfolding. And later, this will blossom into a full-blown crop plan for an entire season where you can start to plan out 90 days in advance and show your longer maturing crops. You can start to see when things are done and when you have space. So you'll notice here, look at that radish line. When you look at the days, around 36 days, there's a gap. And that's because those radishes are coming out of the ground and I have space to plant something else there now. So this is a way for you to visualize when you'll have more space in the future to grow more. So this is a very important document. And then I only put down X's for the days that I harvest just to let me know that I did harvest it. And then I basically put in the amounts in my harvest log. So those are 2 different documents. All right. Highly recommend. These are the 2 things to track that will be so impactful. And if you can master this, you're gonna be so successful in the long run, planting crops and finding out what works and where you're getting most of your harvest from. I can't recommend this enough to do these records. Okay, so another record you could keep, and it's not of the most importance. So in 40 days time, especially if you're brand new to gardening, pests and diseases probably won't reach your garden in 40 days unless it's very hot and humid. If it's cooler seasons like spring, you won't necessarily find as many pests around in those first 40 days, but it takes a while for those pests to discover your crops. And so you might not see any in the first 40 days, but it's nice to have a place to put this information. So basically, each week you can list any pests or diseases that you're observing and rate it on a scale from 1 to 10 of how bad is it. And so 1 being you're just noticing it, it just seems to be like a small occurrence. A 5 is like, this is really significantly affecting my food harvest. Like my leaves have big holes in them and I'm not getting the most amount of harvest that I can. And then 10 is like, it's killing the plant, like the plant is almost gone. So that's the range. And what you want to do if you're having any pest or disease issues is you want to post those issues as soon as possible to the support groups so that we can let you know what's going on. And there's a video as well so you can check out the most common pest and disease issues. Okay, and then what do you want to track? There's documents here where, week by week, maybe there's something, maybe you want to draw a little sketch of like how many leaves each plant has so you can see how much the plant has grown. Maybe you want to know, this is where you capture your questions each week so that you have them all in one place. Like something's happening and you're not sure what, you have a question, maybe you want to write it down so you don't forget. So whatever it is that you want to track. You might also want to track let's say rainfall, things like that, and maybe some notes about your watering situation so that you can set up a watering system for the future. So those are other things that you could potentially track. And then there's extra pages where you can just staple in receipts if you want to staple in receipts, jotting down notes, maybe you want to draw a little bit. This is up to you. So this workbook is really for you, and whatever serves your purposes. It's really to get you up and running, to help you create a system that's going to work for you in the long run. And what you're going to notice is that these worksheets are similar. They're kind of a short hand to my larger templates, which I use for full growing seasons. So this is really like the gateway towards those larger documents. If you can master these couple documents, then you can take a step up for the whole growing season and go for the whole templates. All right, that's it for record keeping. See you on the next video.